Welcome back to the Clemson Dubcast. It's been a while. A couple of weeks, I guess. Thursday, February 3rd, the second signing day of 2022 behind us. If you want great background and insight and intel on who the Tigers got, who they didn't get, Paul Strelo is your guy, as always, at TigerIllustrated.com. Man, he never ceases to amaze at all the bases he's able to cover in further cementing himself as the authority on Clemson football recruiting. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's P-A-R-H-A-M law.com. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Wal-Mart neighborhood market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's C-E-L-E-R-O commerce.com. Okay, tough conversation here, but a very necessary one in a public service sort of vein with David Shelton, longtime sportswriter at the Charleston Post and Courier, has lost two of his children, two boys, to opioid addiction, both at age 26. The most recent, Justin, just 3 weeks ago. The father's mission is to spread awareness and hopefully save a life or two along the way. All right, here we go. Okay, joined by David Shelton of the Charleston Post and Courier, also, I guess, a youth travel baseball coach. Is that right?
Well, I volunteer as an assistant coach at King Bay High School. So I've been doing that I've been coaching baseball for many, many years. More as just a way to give back to kids and as a hobby. I don't get paid to do it. I never ask for money, don't want money. But I did travel ball back in the day, but as my kids got older and got into high school, I began working with the high schools.
And this is kind of weird. I used to work at the Post and Courier, worked there for 5 years. I know your byline, but I don't think we ever actually met, partly because I lived up here and was rarely down there. And I'm guessing you're rarely in the newsroom either, right?
No, especially now. We do everything from home, just like everybody else. I haven't been inside the Post and Courier building for several years, so which is good. I mean, I like working at home and working on the road and doing things like that, so it's fun.
How far back does your newspaper involvement go?
Pretty much in college, I was at Baptist College of Charleston and was the editor of the school newspaper there, and then went straight into startup, the high school sports report, started back in like 1987, 88, and became a staff writer there, and then eventually was the associate editor for quite a while. And then 2000, I bolted out of the newspaper business like a lot of us do, and went into sports administration at Charleston Southern as their media relations director. Change of pace, something different. Did that for about 6.5, 7 years, and then I had to get out of that. College athletics was that's an animal of a different level, and so I got out of that and went back into sports writing, and somewhere along that way, I was kind of stringing for the Post and Courier, and then Phil Bowman, who was the prep guy, got out of it, and I stepped in to replace him to do the full-time preps. And I'm the beat writer, so to speak, for Charleston Southern as well for the Post and Courier. So that's where my heart was. I mean, I tried that college thing, and it was kind of cool, getting to travel around with teams and going to places like Notre Dame and Michigan and with different teams. But it got a little hectic and got a little old pretty quick. So writing is what I like to do, and that's where I think that's my gift. I think that's what God planned for me to be all along. But you tried it, and so I just wanted to go back into writing. So that's what I've been doing since.
Just curious, what specific parts of working in college athletics were a different animal, and what parts sort of it got old?
Well, I think the lack of help at Charleston Southern at the time, it was me and one other guy, and we had 18 varsity sports. A lot of the coaches expected you to travel with them on the road, especially the big sports like football and baseball. So it was 4 or 5 road trips during football season, and then about 10 or 12, 14 road trips during basketball, and you do that over a number of years. And you still have to get all your work done and do media guides and all that kind of stuff. And they since have added some personnel. College athletics, as you well know, has changed quite a bit with the video streaming and the ESPN Plus and all that kind of stuff. It was just starting to get to that point when I left, and I really didn't want to deal with it. I just with the limited staff, I just thought, I'm overworked now. It's one of those deals where you enjoy the work, but you're working a lot. I mean, 60, 70 hour weeks, and you do that over a period of time. It just got, I love the people. I love the coaches. I love the sporting events, obviously, but just a lot of stuff, a lot of bus rides and trying to, write, be on a basketball bus ride and try to write the baseball media guide on a bus. You do that once and you're like, okay, I never want to do it again. And before you know it, you're doing it again. Then you're doing softball. Then you're doing, the track coaches want their results posted on the website. Oh, by the way, we're going to build a new website. We need you to help with that. So it just, granted, I could do the job now, I think, because I like at Charleston Southern right now, they've got like 5 people. But back then it was me and another guy and some college work study students who really didn't want to be there. They just needed the money and didn't know much about sports and didn't really care. So you don't have that, it was just a small school. It's not like at a Clemson or a big ACC or SEC school where you have dozens of people that can help you. It was very limited, and it just, I wasn't getting any younger, and the stress was starting to get to me. So I took the easy way out. I just said, guys, y'all can have this. I loved working there. I loved the school. I loved the people there, but the work was really tough.
You mentioned like the advent of streaming and all that. I don't really know much about who's responsible for that. Like at a small school, like streaming an event. So the athletic department is responsible for setting up all the cameras and all the technical parts.
Oh yeah, yeah. Actually, my son works in the truck as kind of a graphics producer, and then he's run camera. But yeah, they have 3 cameras. There's cords all over the place. They have a truck parked outside that there's like a control room. So there's probably 3 people in there. So I would guess they probably takes 8 to 10 people to run that, to do that whole thing. They got to run cords and cameras and power and all that kind of stuff. So that was just, they have an assistant director of media relations who that's his job. He runs that whole area. like I said, when it was starting to come in and I was there, I was like, wait a minute, I don't know anything about this. I'm like you. I was just like, I just want to write a game story. I don't want to do all this. And, but there's a lot of cameras involved. There's a lot of expense. I know the initial outlay was, when they started it, was, like $25,000 to get some of the equipment. And now they've got a little trailer type truck they park outside the gym or outside the football stadium that kind of runs everything. It's like it's like a TV production, but just on a lower scale. But it does require some people and some funds for sure.
It's interesting. I've told people who are curious about my profession and sort of what it's like, that of course there are plenty of hard parts to it, some parts that feel like work, but there are a lot of elements to it that don't feel like work. And it seems like with your job at Charleston Southern, a lot of it felt like work, whereas when you're a preps writer, on a particular day, you just have to focus on that game. And you go to a game, and of course, you follow it closely and then do some interviews, and then you write your story, and you feel kind of fulfilled after walking away from the stadium. I know that's the way it is with me and others. Does that pretty much nail it, sort of the essence of it for you as well?
Oh, absolutely. I love going to sporting events. I love covering, high school football and high school basketball and track and stuff like that. That's what, when I tell people all the time, I feel guilty that I get paid to do what I do. I'm glad I get paid because I have bills to pay, but I have never paid to see a sporting event in 32 years. Even when I was at the college, I obviously went for free, traveled around for free, didn't spend a lot of my money or anything like that. But even now, I look forward to Friday nights. I look forward to my pregame meal. I pick a restaurant near a high school that I'm going to cover that maybe I haven't tried. And, it's like, man, I'm getting paid to go to this game and watch these kids play. And it is a lot of satisfaction. I mean, I know you felt this before, when you hit send in that email and it's done, you just feel like you accomplished something, and we're not, curing the world's ills, or we're just writing a game story on a high school football game or whatever, but it does feel satisfying and gratifying until you get the email the next morning that you misspelled Little Johnny's last name. Then you're like, why am I doing this? But I don't get a lot of those, but but I do get a few, and I know, Malcolm DeWitt, the sports editor, he'll get an email and forward it to me, and in the email he'll say, hey, I just thought you wanted to know this, chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. And I was like, oh, wow, I left out an L in this kid's last name. Man, I'm just terrible. But, with the way deadlines are now with the newspapers, at the Post and Courier, we have, you'd love this, a 9:40 deadline. And, football games are getting over like it.
Wow.
But during football season, they give us till like 11. But right now, we're at 9:40, and you go to a high school basketball game. If it goes overtime, it's Fortunately, we have the web, and I'll email them to say, hey, you're not getting this for print, but put it on the web because this game's lasting forever. And but it's a little stressful then. But what's life without a little bit of stress?
It's crazy. You talk about that deadline pressure and then just the sort of chaos of a post game and you're doing interviews or you cover a great game and then you go back and you write your article. One instance that stands out to me is after Clemson won the national championship in Tampa in the 16 season, and obviously total madness with the way that game ended. And you're just not used to writing about a national championship. Certainly not used to writing about a national championship won with 1 second left when a superstar throws it to a former walk-on, and then you spend an hour and a half, collecting scenes and things from the locker room and all that. And then so you sit down and write, but then and while you're writing, it's not like you're like, oh, this is a masterpiece, At least in my perspective, when I hit send, I'm like, did what I just wrote, does that make any sense? Like, I have no idea what I just wrote. And then maybe it's good, I don't know. And then I was on the way, I was taking the bus, the media shuttle back to the hotel, I guess about a half hour later. And I guess this is the benefit of working for a website, because the story was already up, as opposed to newspapers that have a bit more constraints. But I got a text from a good friend who said they were all in their tailgate, Clemson fans obviously, and they had read my article and it made them cry. And I'm like, wow, I guess it was pretty good. I don't. And so it's just such a strange craft, I guess, like where you don't even know if what you just did was any good until you kind of are able to sit back and hear from other people, or actually read it when you're not faced with all the crazy stress of a deadline.
Yeah, and you go back and the one thing I've done is I've read back stories, the next day in the paper or on the web, and go, man, I should have put this in, or I forgot to put this in. Yeah. There's so much stuff that you left out.
Absolutely.
Because you're trying to get it in time, and then you're kind of like, with the high school thing, I do a prep notebook every Wednesday. So if I leave out something really important, I kind of cover it in my notebook, kind of oh, by the way, last Friday night, this guy did this or whatever. But it sometimes is very frustrating to read what you wrote, a day later, and all the stuff comes back like, I can't believe I did that, or I missed that, or whatever. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30-something years, and, now I try not to stress over that kind of stuff anymore. I just feel like, okay, well, I screwed that up. What is life without a couple of screw-ups along the way?
What I love about it is you're never a finished product. You're always trying to get better. You're always making mistakes, which is good. It keeps you humble and keeps you with a purpose. So the high school sports report, the late 80s, obviously the coverage of recruiting is vastly different than it was back then. I'm just curious for, with you having been sort of in the middle of it, of all the evolution of it, what are some of your observations on how it's changed over the last decades with, I guess back in the 80s, it was High School Sports Report, then Phil Kornblut on the radio with his recruiting dispatches, and then the internet kind of took over in the late 90s, early 2000s, and just curious for your insight.
Well, it was. I said this on a radio show back in the December signing period, how much I hate recruiting now. Like I used to, back in the 80s or in the 90s, like you said before internet, and, kids, you didn't have announcements. You didn't have, hey, these are my five, the tweets that said, these are my final 20. And, I'm going to choose between these 20 schools. And you didn't have updates every day from kids. You had to really dig for the information. Like you had to know people, you had to have a high school coach, I always go back to the Steve Davis recruiting back when he was at Spartanburg. And, I had a coach there that I could get little tidbits from, but we didn't have anything we could do with the information because it wasn't, like I said, it was pre-internet kind of stuff. So you knew all this stuff was going on, but you didn't really have, you didn't really have nowhere to put it. There was a lot of secrets, and there was a lot of back channel stuff. Now it's so wide open, and it's just, there's no suspense anymore. I mean, there'll be a player here or there. I'm sure, Clemson or South Carolina, somebody's waiting on a guy today or in December. But, But back then, recruiting went all the way up to today. Today was like a huge day. And, I'm just looking at a list of signees right here in the Charleston area, and there are no Power 5 signees in Charleston today. There's 30-something kids that signed football letters of intent, and, they're all going to very small schools. It's not because now the big-time prospects, they sign in December. I'm not a big fan of that early sign. I understand why you have it, but from my perspective, in my position, in my job, I don't like it because I love the drama leading. I mean, January used to be crazy. Mm-hmm. Back you talk about the days of Phil Cornwood. Phil and I are very close friends. We would talk every day, sometimes in the middle of the night. Did you just hear this? Did you just hear this? And I even did a recruiting show with Phil on Sunday nights back in the 90s where we'd talk for an hour about recruiting. And I remember Bill King in Nashville had his big recruiting show, on Sunday nights. There was so much drama and so much unknown. And now it's just kind of like, there's no drama. I mean, there might be one kid today that everybody's really focused on. Back in the 90s, it was like the entire signing class. You just couldn't wait to hear where this kid was going, where this kid was going. So the internet and the websites and all the recruiting people doing it now, it just kind of takes the fun out of it, I guess. And maybe I'm just old, and but that's okay. I still read them, and I still kind of keep up with it, but I just miss the drama of, okay, Steve Davis is going to sign at 2:00, and is he going to be Auburn, Clemson, or Georgia? And there's so many factors involved, and coaches hiding in the bushes to see who the other coaches are coming up the driveway, and it's just I tell a story. One time I knew a coach. It was a young assistant coach who is now an older coach, but at a particular high school that he would call me with again, we're talking home phones now. We didn't have cell phones, couldn't send text messages, but he would call me every time a college coach would come into the school or would go to this kid's house for a visit. And, it was just kind of, it was just different. Everything's out there now. You get kids posting pictures on their Twitter or Instagram with the college coaches in the house. So there's no drama. Oh, well, Dabo Sweeney was there today because there's a picture with John Doe. But back in the 90s, we didn't have any of that stuff. So it was very dramatic. Signing day was a huge thing. And I'm not trying to take it away from these kids that did sign today. It is huge for their families, and we cover it, and I cover it, and I'm happy for these kids. It's just from the entire picture is just totally different now than it was, really. I guess it's been 25 years or so.
There is some drama. Clemson has 3 guys today that they went into today with 3 big fish they were uncertain about, and then I guess 4 years ago Justin Ross pulled off a shocker by casting his lot with Clemson. But you're right; it's nowhere near the magnitude or I guess the volume of it. Okay, so the ultimate reason I connected with you, and sad to say this is the occasion, but you have lost 2 sons to opioid addiction. You had you're very courageous in publicizing it, sharing the story. You want to spread awareness about how awful of a thing that it is, how prevalent it is, and your hope is that if you could just save one person's life, turn one person around, then it'll be worth all this public disclosure. So I guess if you wouldn't mind just sort of enlightening those who don't know. I guess Justin, you lost him. Was that in January?
Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago today. As a matter of fact, it was January 11th, and he was both my sons. Ryan died in 2015 at age 26, and Justin died a couple of weeks ago at age 26. So I have 4 children, and 2 of them are doing great, and I have 2 grandchildren, and all those, they're fine. But I had 2 sons, my oldest and my youngest, that didn't deal with life very well. Didn't handle adversity well, and turned to drugs. At first, the marijuana, gosh, 90% of the world probably tries marijuana at some point. I never did, but they just struggled with life. And in Justin's case, who's the most recent, both of them were very good baseball players, very good athletes. Ryan, the oldest, kind of got out of athletics a lot younger. Justin actually went all the way through high school as a baseball player, a pitcher, and an outfielder, and really athletic. Could run, could throw. Pretty good hitter, not a great hitter. Pitching was his strength. I mean, he could pitch. Had an unbelievable changeup for a high school kid that he really loved throwing. Kind of watched Greg Maddox video a lot. By the time he came on, Greg Maddox was pretty much done. But would watch how Greg Maddox would pitch and try to emulate him. And I'm like, hey, don't try to be Greg Maddox, because there's only one Greg Maddox. But his problems began when high school ended and his brother died. Kind of not right at the same time, but very, very in the same year. He lost his older brother, and then high school baseball was gone. And he wanted to. I hate to say this. He was a good student, but he did not like school. He did not didn't like going to class every day. He didn't like school, and he loved playing baseball, and he loved his teammates. And he kind of went to school so he could play baseball. And then after high school, his brother died, and he was going to go to a junior college and try to pitch a little bit, and just said, Dad, I don't want to do classes. I said, well, son, you got to go to class, and if you want to pitch, that's the rules. You can't just, it's not a men's league. And so he got out of baseball. He lost touch with his teammates, and then slowly just deteriorated. Went from marijuana use, and then honestly, I don't know everything he did, because he became an adult and kind of started doing things, that he didn't have to tell me and I didn't have to approve. And, but he became addicted to heroin. And then, like I've told people, the last year, basically since COVID, last 2 years, I guess, he just went totally downhill. He went from a 170-pound athletic, strong kid to the day he died, which weighed 100 pounds, and didn't look like the same kid. I was in contact with him daily. He lived with me growing up. We were divorced. His mother and I were divorced, but he pretty much was with me most of his life, even up until the last couple of weeks of his life. I saw him every single day and watched him deteriorate, and spent so many times, crying and begging him to please, let's do something with this. And his comment was, I got this. Don't worry about me. I went through some health issues. I'm a diabetic and had some kidney issues. And he's like, you focus on you, and I'll be okay. And, but he wasn't okay, and he wouldn't get help. And, finally, 3 weeks ago, he was found in the restaurant bathroom with had passed away in a stall in the bathroom. He got high, and that was the end.
Do you have any, I guess with Ryan as well, do you have any feel for how long they were on heroin?
Well, Ryan was a pill taker. He was the Oxycontin, Opana. He wasn't really he didn't do heroin. I think he might have done coke. Ryan was different in terms of drug use. He was probably 16. He got in a little bit of trouble, and we basically thought we were being tough love, and we sent him off to juvenile detention, and he spent several months there. Came out, was good, but and they're both. And the thing is, there's this perception of drug addicts are just horrible people. And they're not. My boys were great boys. Like, they were very loving to their parents and their family, but they had an addiction. They were horrible drug addicts, but they were not horrible people. And Ryan, the oldest, I mean, Justin worshipped him because he was the oldest brother. And I think with Justin's drug use began, maybe, like I said, I think he started smoking weed a little bit in high school. At his memorial service, a lot of his former teammates were there, and they came up to me and they said, I feel bad, I have to say this, but, Ryan would get high with me and do this. And I don't blame those kids. They didn't turn into drug addicts. My son went gradually into his early 20s, recreational use, I think. And then, and the thing that people don't understand about heroin is it is highly, highly addictive. It is, very few people come out of heroin addiction and never go back. 74% that I read online, 74% of heroin or opioid abusers after rehab go back. Mm-hmm. And it's just it attacks your mind. You become dependent on it. Then it attacks your body, and your body starts to break down, and then it attacks your soul. And when it gets to your soul, it's over. I mean, Justin always told me, I don't want to be a heroin addict, but I can't get off it because the withdrawal from heroin is like anything. Like, he's like, Dad, you don't understand the pain, the sickness. And basically that's where I call him very weak. I would tell him, Justin, everybody goes through pain, everybody goes through, sickness and illness. And we're in a pandemic. People are dying from that. You got to fight this. And he just did not have the will. I hate to say this about a kid that I love so much, but he's very weak. I tried to use my personal health experiences and say, listen, I just had biopsies on my kidneys. I feel like I might have kidney cancer. I may die, but I'm going to fight this thing. I'm not going to, just give up. But he just did not have that attitude. It was very, even when he pitched, if he's throwing great and getting people out, he was super duper. When a guy give up a home run, and he'd lose his mind. And, it was just, he didn't handle adversity well. And that eventually that's what led to, to his demise. And what I try to tell kids and parents now is we've got to let these children know that we are there, that we love them, that we will help them. They don't have to fight this alone. And I think Justin felt like he didn't want to bring everybody with him, so he wanted to fight it alone. And that was just not the right way to do it. And that's not how we wanted it. But he did a lot of bad things, in the last couple of years. He stole from me. He stole from his family. He needed money so bad because he couldn't keep a job. He lost several jobs because he stole money out of the register, wherever he worked, at a restaurant or whatever. And it consumed him. That's why I say it just consumes your soul, and you can't get away from it. And I don't want other kids to think that, first of all, we got to prevent them from starting. But if they start, and kids are going to try things, and we know that, we're not ignorant to the fact that kids are going to be kids and teenagers, the pressures of life. But we got to be there and catch that thing early, because it is not. I would not wish this pain on my worst enemy. Not that I have any enemies that I know of,
But if I had an enemy, I would not wish, I hope your kid dies of a drug overdose. I hope your kid dies before you do. That is the most, it's the most awful feeling in the world. I mean, I've lost a mother, a father, a brother just died in October. I've lost family members. I've lost friends. There's no pain even close to losing a child. It's not the way we're supposed to go. We're supposed to go first, and they can grieve for us, but then they get to continue living. Now, I've lost two sons who never really got a chance to live, but I got to keep on going. I got to keep living. And, you know, I'll be 56 in April. And, you know, the death of Justin has brought me around to the fact that until I die, I'm going to give this message. I'm going to, if I can, like I said, if I can just help one kid understand you're not alone. You don't have to do this alone. And, you know, it's funny. I was talking to a coach the other day, and I said, he wants me to come and speak to his football program, his football team. And I said, you know, there'll be 60 kids in there, and 50 of them will walk out of there like, okay, another guy that talks about drugs, you know, blah, blah, blah. But if one of those other 10 comes back and says, you know what he said makes sense. And, you know, maybe he was not doing drugs, or maybe he was thinking about doing drugs, or, you know, maybe he's having trouble at home or in school with a girlfriend or with his team or whatever. But if I can just affect that one mind and make him understand that, you know, you love your parents, you will not put your parents through the pain that I'm in. If you truly say, I love my mom and my dad, and I have an ex-wife, the mother of those two boys, and she is very different from me. She can't talk about it, but she's been through a hard time, and just seeing the pain, you know, that she has gone through. You know, if you're a high school football athlete, or if you're just a normal kid, you're in the band or whatever, you love your parents, you won't get in a situation where you have to put them in this situation, because it is the most pain you will ever experience in your life. And, you know, hopefully that message will get to kids, and we will get to them and say, you know what, Mom, I love you. I will never do anything to jeopardize that. And some things we can't control. You know, we can't control car accidents. We can't control, you know, bad things, you know, cancer or whatever. But we have control over drugs. We make that choice. We have a decision-making process in our brain. And not all of our brains work the same. My son's decision-making processes were far different than mine. But it ended up taking their life, and I just have to try to do what I can do to get through. If I can just get through. And, you know, I keep a picture on my phone. This sounds probably morbid, but I have a picture on my phone of my son, Justin, on a gurney, covered up to his neck because his body was ravaged, but I had to identify him, and I have that picture. I took a picture of him laying, you know, dead on that table, because I knew at that very moment, I said, I've got to be able to reach. I knew right then. With my first son, I kind of crawled under a rock. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't, you know, I was very depressed, but I moved on. But when it happened again, and with Justin, I was so much closer to him because of our, you know, he grew up with me and was in my house, you know, up until the day he died. I wanted that picture on my phone. And, you know, it sounds crazy, but I have pictures of my son in an athletic uniform, you know, playing baseball and all that. And then I have this picture, and I want people to see this is who he was. He was you. He was a high school athlete, loving life, loving sports, loving competition. And then this is where he ended up, because he could not make the right decision. And, you know, like I said, if I can save one, I'll move to the next one. But it's very difficult, but it's something that I have to do. My life's mission is now to try to speak to people and make an impact, because I don't want this, you know, it's going to happen. I mean, there are, you know, over 100,000 opioid deaths this year or last year. People are going to die. but we got to try to save the ones we can save. That's basically my mission.
Is that mission, is that how you explain here a mere 3 weeks after losing Justin, you're able to wake up every morning, function, go to press conferences, do your job as normal, or as normal as you can get?
Oh yeah. When Ryan died, I was a basket case, not outwardly. People did not see a change in me or anything. But yeah, I just feel like I'm a different person. I'm still very hurt, and I have my moments. But talking about it, certainly, like with you or with some other people I've talked to, it certainly helps. But I think I would have a much more difficult time had I done what I did with Ryan. Had I went and hid under a rock and just didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to respond to text messages or emails. I'm so sorry. And I still love getting those messages, but I handle them better. But you're exactly right. That's how I function. I was at a signing today, and the athletic director, basically he was like, "I'm glad you're here, but I'm surprised to see you." And, I looked at him, I said, "Hey, life goes on. We gotta keep going." Now, tonight at 11:30 or 12 o'clock, when it's time to lay my head down, I have my moments. I will not lie. I have my moments, but again, I wake up every morning and say, how can I affect somebody positively today? And, I'm fortunate that I get to coach high school baseball. I'm around 45, 50 kids every day. All three levels, B team, JV, varsity. And then I'm already lining up some speaking to teams, mostly in the Charleston area for right now, but I will go anywhere. Anybody that listens to your podcast, I will go anywhere as soon as I can get there. I don't want money. I'm not trying to get rich off this. I don't want to be paid. I want to just, give my story and lay it out there. And I want to be real. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I've been to speeches like this where things are kind of sugar-coated. They don't want to offend. I'm not worried about offending people. Whatever I got to say to wake somebody up is what I'll say. And like I said, I have this picture on my phone, and if I feel like I need to show that, I will show it. And I would say, this guy died of a drug overdose, of a heroin overdose. This doesn't need to be you. And you don't want your mother or your father to have to show up somewhere and say, yes, that's my son or that's my daughter. It's not, I will never, ever forget that. I don't know how much longer I have on this earth, but that image will never leave my mind. And I think as long as I remember that image, I'll have the motivation to continue doing what I've set out to do.
Where were you and Justin in 2015 when you learned Ryan was gone?
Justin was with a friend, and I was actually on my way to pick up Ryan. He was at his mother's house, and I was going to pick him up. He was going to go do some work with me that day. And we were kind of excited about it because we hadn't, like I said, I didn't see Ryan every single day. We'd go months without seeing each other. We might text or whatever because he was doing his own thing out there in the world. But he was going to go help me do some things. So I was going over to his mother's, and on my way to pick him up, she called me hysterical. And she was like, Ryan's dead on the couch. And, basically what had happened is he had taken a pill that night when he went to sleep because his back was hurting, and he had a little back issue going on at the time. And it was too much of the drug. He had taken the drug before, but it was too much this time. Like, it was supposed to be 5 milligrams, and I think he took 20, and it killed him in his sleep. So, obviously we had to call family. I have a daughter, I have another son. And I had to find Justin. I think he was pretty sure he was at a teammate's house because this was a Saturday morning, and we had just started. Cane Bay had just started preseason practices, so I think he had spent the night with a friend, and so we found him, and Justin was crushed. I mean, well, my whole family was crushed. Like I said, it happened that one time, and we, okay, we got through this. Everything's, we're functioning adults again, and then this happens, and my daughter is now my oldest child. She was my second. She's my only daughter, and she's so strong, and she helps me, and she has my 2 grandkids, and she's helped me a tremendous amount, but I know she hurts. And then my other son, Brandon, who is 27 now, also a very good writer, very, very talented kid. And I know he's hurting. He doesn't say much. He doesn't talk a lot. He's a little different than his dad, that's for sure. But we're all hurting, and but we're all going to get through it. And both of my kids are very supportive of what I want to do. And I don't do Facebook, but they do, and they put a bunch of stuff out on their Facebook, and that has led to a lot of people contacting me. And I got a call the other night from a lady I don't know, and she lost a son in March. 30 years old, to alcohol poisoning. And we talked for an hour, just, chit chat, just like you and I. I told her my story. She told me her story, and I think I helped her. I think by the end of the conversation, I think I helped her. But you know what? She helped me too, because I was able to talk about it. And that's the difference between this one and Ryan is I would have never, had I been approached by you or Bobby Harton in Charleston or any of these guys that do these podcasts, I would have, 7 years ago, I would have said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it. This one, I'm approaching it differently because it's got to stop. It's got to stop.
So you wouldn't have opened up out of shame, out of privacy, out of what?
I think shame, embarrassment. I think, and I definitely think it was embarrassment. I was ashamed. I thought I had failed him. Even though I had people in my family and, David, you were a great dad. And he said he always loved you. And that's one thing about both of them is you hardly ever ended a conversation without them saying, I love you, Dad. And, sometimes you hear that and you're just like, well, that's just words. But I really thought they loved me. But I thought I failed Ryan. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to talk to people about it. I just wanted it to go away. Even though I was still hurting and it was in me, I didn't want to share it. And, but that's the difference with Justin is I'm still ashamed that I'm not really ashamed, but it is embarrassing to have to admit that 2 of your children have overdosed on drugs and died. But it's not the same. It's not the same embarrassment. It's kind of like, this happened to me, and I'm dealing with it, and I don't like it, and I hope it never happens again. Which I'm pretty sure it won't with my other 2 children. But I don't want it to happen to you either. And I think I owe it to society. I mean, we all want to leave our life having made an impact somehow. And this is the way I can make an impact. I just believe that.
If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith & Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-35 507. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. You're mentioning Ryan's back problems. That kind of is an entry into an important part of this, is that so many people who end up hooked on opioids and heroin, they didn't start by getting high. They started. Ron Morris, a couple of years ago, the former columnist for the State, had him on the podcast a couple of times. He had debilitating back problems and developed an addiction to opioids based on what he was prescribed to deal with that pain. And there's so many people that are in that boat who didn't really make the choice to, it didn't start as a recreational thing. And so that's the whole other side of this is that it's not just something that starts with drinking or smoking weed or whatever, that people are trying to manage their pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan was in that boat. Justin physically was fine. Ryan had a back issue. He had been examined. He'd went to doctors. They'd put him on drugs to help the pain. It was like a spine thing. But eventually, I think I don't know the exact details, but he became so dependent on those drugs. The doctors basically said, "Listen, we got to back you off." They saw, I guess his doctor saw, "Hey, you're asking for refills way too soon," kind of thing. So when they tried to wean him off and say, we're not giving you another prescription until 30 days is up, then I think he looked elsewhere, and that's where it started. He I'll be honest, Larry, you can get on Facebook right now. You can find drugs if you want.
Oh, yeah.
You can get on Instagram. You can find them. And he went on Facebook and said, knew some people. He was he knew some people in that world. And this guy's like, "Hey, you need to take this, for $20. This will make your back feel better. It'll help you sleep." And so that's how that became an issue with Justin. I think it became recreational, but I think he was hurting. I think he had pain inside from just life. Life was just getting to him, and his brother dying and losing jobs, and it just became like you and I wake up every morning and drink a cup of coffee and start planning our day. Okay, I'm going to interview David on my podcast, or I'm going to go to this signing, and I'm going to go talk to this guy. Justin woke up saying, "All right, I got to find $20. I got to find $20 because I got to get high." And it was $20. I mean, people think, "Oh my God, he's on heroin. He's spending, you could get a week's worth of heroin for $100, but he just needed it for a couple of days, and then it would come back, and he would need it again." And that's how he woke up every day. The last 2 years of his life was, "I got to get high. I got to get through this." And unfortunately, he just never could stop. I mean, it just took control of his life.
Did either of them ever go to treatment?
Ryan did a little bit, but walked out, and Justin refused to go. And because he was an adult, we tried to get to hospital because he'd been in the hospital a couple times with injuries that he poking needles in the veins and stuff. And they said, we can't do it. I was in the process of going through a court. Unfortunately, COVID slowed back everything in courts, but I was trying to get medical power of attorney where I could make the medical decisions for him, because the hospital said he's not capable of making the right decisions medically. If I could have gotten that in time, I could have had him, a judge would have put him in rehab. But again, I stress this, the heroin addiction, rehab may have helped, but you got to change so much of the mind, and it's just so bad. And I just think, the prevention, the don't ever start message is the best message. I just, find an outlet, find somebody to talk to, don't start heroin or opioids, because they will wreck your life. And it's just so hard to come back from it. But Justin just didn't have the will to fight it. And I love the kid to death, but I'm so frustrated and angry sometimes that he was so weak, that he wouldn't do this. He always said, "I'm never going to let you and Mom go through what you did with Ryan." And I reminded him of this every day for 2 years. I was like, "You promised me I would not have to experience this, Dad. I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to die. Don't worry about it." But there was no question in my mind the last 3 or 4 months that I was going to get a knock on the door. I just knew where he was at. And I even told my ex-wife, his mother, I was like, "We need to prepare ourselves. This is not going to end well," because he had totally given up any effort to get better. And sure enough, I got home from a high school basketball game. I'm writing a story at my desk in my house, and I hear knocking on the door. It's like 10:30. I'm like, okay, who's knocking on my door? And it was the coroner and an officer. And when I opened the door, I was like, "You got to be kidding me." And he was like, "Yeah, are you Shelton's dad?" And I'm like, "I know why you're here." And they were like, well, how do you know? I was like, "This is the second time it's happened." And they were just like, "Oh, wow. Okay. We didn't realize, and I was like, "Listen, don't worry about it." So we went through the details. They said, can you come, make sure it's him? And I'm like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure it's him." But it didn't make it any easier. But I guess in the sense I had prepared myself for the inevitable, but it was still quite a shock, because you have that guy that you used to go to dinner with, or, they wake up in the morning and he drank all your coffee and you're mad because you got no more coffee. And he's like, "Oh, my bad, Dad." And now I have plenty of coffee. Like, I always have coffee, and because he's not there to drink it. So I miss that. I miss that kind of that frustration. I miss all that. It sounds crazy, but it was just my way of life. Our daily argument over, "I can't believe you ate all the bread. What were you doing last night eating all the bread? I need some toast in the morning." And, and he would always be like, "Oh, my bad. I'm just like, I miss those days, but honestly, he's out of pain, because he was really in a lot of pain, emotionally and deep down, and he is out of that. So a selfish part of me wants him back, but in the grand scheme of things, he's better off not going through that life anymore. Yeah, I want him back, but I understand that things are better for him, for his soul, and it's better for me because I'm able to do what I'm doing now. Talk to you and talk to people, just share my story, make an impact if I can, and just go day to day, see where it ends up.
You mentioned that with Ryan, y'all administered some tough love, I guess, sending him to, you said, a juvenile.
Yeah, juvenile detention.
Yeah. What is your? I mean, obviously, there's nothing close to a perfect answer in situations like that. I'm just curious how you look back at that approach in hindsight.
Yeah, that's tough, because I totally treated Justin differently. Now I was still very, I don't want to say strict or hard, but I mean, he always knew where I came from and what I thought was right and wrong. And, and I used what I learned, the lessons I learned from Ryan was, I thought at first that I had done wrong, that maybe we shouldn't have done what we did with that situation. But the more I analyzed it later, I don't think that led to increased drug use, because I think that he just had a problem. Again, I've said it a couple times, they're weak mentally and just not able to handle stuff that come before them. And I think the back issue really took hold of him. But I'd always wondered if we did the right thing when he was 15. I think he's 15 or 16 when we did that. And, he did come out a different person, for a while, very productive and, like I said, he was always, a pretty good kid. And, he's very smart. He just didn't utilize his ability, but I mean, he was the kind of kid that could, for whatever reason, I don't even know, but he could take a computer apart and put it back together like I couldn't even imagine. The things he could do with a computer in terms of repairing them and fixing them, I don't know where he learned that. Maybe he learned it in juvenile, I don't know. But he was really smart, and that's what made it frustrating with Ryan was that he was a smart kid and he had a lot of potential. He just chose to do things his own way. Again, after he became an adult, he just marched to the beat of his own drum. And, he wasn't as dependent on me as Justin was, because like I said, Justin, other than moving out for a couple of months at a time, Justin pretty much was with me. Ryan, time his early 20s, he was out, like he was on his own doing his own thing. Justin was a lot more dependent on me. And I will say that because of what happened with Ryan, I was kind of dependent on Justin. I was living alone. Having him there, was really good for me. Even though late in the late time, we'd argue and, fuss and fight and all that kind of stuff. But I enjoyed having him around me a lot of times, because of the relationship I had with Ryan. It wasn't strained. It was just that, kind of like all adults, they move on with their life and they see their parents, at holidays, or they talk to them or whatever. Ryan was not dependent on me to survive day to day. And I felt like I kind of took Justin like he needed me and I needed him, because he was my youngest son. So I think in a sense, that's kind of how that evolved. That's why I treated Justin differently than I did Ryan. But that was also the way Ryan wanted to be treated. And like I said, Justin was very dependent on me, so he wanted that relationship to be the way it was until the very end. And then Justin just kind of went out on his own and said, I don't want to be a burden anymore. And, was living in a tent city behind the Wal-Mart and living in a tent and with some drug addicts and some military veterans that had no home, a lot of homeless people. And the thing about Justin's situation was he didn't have to be homeless because my home was open. Like I wanted him there. I still felt like I could save him somehow, but I think now looking back, I realized in my own mind that I wasn't going to save him. The last 6 months, he really deteriorated, and it's sort of selfish of me to think that I could have saved him, because Lord knows we tried everything, and none of it worked.
So when he was living with you and you knew he had a bad problem, how did you leave the house? I guess maybe worried what he might steal. I mean, what was that like?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And he stole from his grandmother. He stole from his mom. I literally, Larry, slept every night with my wallet under my pillow. So if I got to where I would never carry cash, ever. I never had $1, never had cash on me. I would sleep with my wallet under my pillow so he couldn't get my debit card, because we'd had an experience with that before where he Venmo'd money off my debit card to a dealer. And, so it was, he stole lawnmowers, lawn equipment, would just show up at a pawn shop, just so he could get a fix. So it was very stressful. Not just for me, but for other members of the family, because he did not want to steal, but because he could not keep a job, he could not keep an income, then he needed to get high. So he resorted to that. And so, it was very difficult. I hated, like you said, if I had to go cover a game or something and he was here, I'd just be like, oh God, what's gonna be here when I get back. But a lot of times when I would leave, he would be with me and I'd drop him off places. He would not, because he really didn't like being alone here by himself. But there was those situations that my total, like even now, he's been gone 3 weeks and for the first week I had, the habit was I was still putting my wallet under my pillow. And then I finally, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm okay now. Like, he's not going to take it. So it became such a habit of just making sure everything was, quote unquote, tied down where it couldn't walk. I would hide. I have 2 laptops, one that I rarely use. It's a Chromebook that was given to me for Father's Day by my other son. And I basically hid that because I was afraid I'd come home and it'd be gone. And he could get a couple $100 for it and get high. And, but yeah, a lot of stuff that I was doing, I don't have to do anymore. And like, I used to worry, like I said, the coffee, he'd drink the Keurig cup, my last Keurig cup. Well, I have so much coffee now, I don't know what to do with because he's not drinking it. And he he loves coffee. So he would drink, I drink decaf because of my kidney issues. I'm caffeine free. So, he would just drink it and just be up all night. Like his sleep patterns were unbelievable because of the drugs. And heroin is the drug that will knock you out. It will make you sleep. And that's why I even asked him one day, I said, why heroin? Why not, meth or whatever? He goes, well, meth jacks you up and makes you go 100 miles an hour. He goes, I don't want that. He goes, I just want to lay down and go into euphoria or whatever you want to call it. And that's what it did to him. So a lot of times if I leave here and he'd be asleep in his room or on the couch, I would assume that he had gotten high and he wasn't going to wake up anyway for 12 hours or whatever it is. But like I said, a lot of times if I left, I would be like, hey, you want me to drop you off somewhere? Really, when you're looking back at it, it's like, what a weird way to live. Like you got to sleep with your wallet under your pillow. That's ridiculous. But I'm serious. Other people are having to do the same thing. Oh, yeah. I'm not a unique person. There are people that are going through what I went through that are, if they hear this, they're going to be like, oh my God, I did the same thing. And it's just, they don't realize, although I think my son at the end did realize that he was affecting other people's lives in a very negative way. It's not, they're selfish in that, hey, I just want to get high. I just want to be left alone. But a lot of times they don't realize what they're doing to others. I think Justin did at the end. I think that's why he left in November and said, I don't want to be a burden anymore. I'm going to go try this on my own. And I'm like, dude, you're sleeping in a tent by a campfire in the woods and it's like 28 degrees. That's not proving that you can do it on your own. You need to get a job and get an apartment. And, I tried that angle with him. But he was back there with people. I met those people. I went back there after he died and I announced to all of them, Justin is dead. And, a lot of people were upset and a lot of people, one lady came to me and she said, you know what? She goes, he always said he made a mistake that he didn't belong here. And we kept telling him, go home. Your dad, you have a place. And she was very upfront with me. She said 2 weeks before he died that he had overdosed at the camp, and they had Narcan, which is provided by the police. They provide these little communities with Narcan because they know that people are doing drugs. They don't want people to die. But that he had overdosed and they had Narcan and they brought him back. And she said, did you know that? And I was like, I saw him every day. I always say, how are you doing? He goes, I'm fine. And she's like, no, he was dying. And I was like, he never even hinted to me. Had I known that, like if he had got in my car one day and said, oh, by the way, last night I overdosed, I mean, I would have probably did something very drastic. Like I would have probably drove to a local jail and said, y'all lock him up. Like I can't, but he didn't. And he didn't try to burden me with it, which kind of tells who he was. He was a very loving person. He loved his family, loved people, but he didn't want me to worry about him being out there. But like I said earlier, I just knew the end was near. I didn't know about that situation, but I knew the way he was going, and just his refusal to come home, just to sleep for one night, just sleep on the couch when it's cold. Just, I would tell him, just walk up. Either just walk up or call me. I'll come get you or whatever. But he would always call and want money. He would not call and want to come home. He would say, Dad, can you just spot me $20 so I can, eat for the next couple of days? I'm like, Justin, I know what you're using this money for. Like, I'll feed you. I'll bring you whatever you want, but I'm not giving you money. And apparently he was getting money somehow, panhandling or begging or whatever, but he got enough money to kill himself that night. So he just didn't get it from me.
Why do you think he told the folks in the tent city that he didn't belong there?
I think he thought it was a cool idea at first. And the way the lady explained it, she said he was very quiet, which was not his personality when he was in, he was always very outgoing. But she said he would just sit around the fire and people would talk about their life, and there'd be Iraq war veterans who lost everything, and they were living, and they would tell stories about fighting in Iraq, and the other people were drug addicts, and how they couldn't go home, and when he would talk, he would just be like, man, he goes, I don't think I belong here. He goes, I think I made a mistake, and this lady Samantha said that's when we all kind of like, well, dude, go home. Like, you don't have to be here. We're here because we have no choice. We don't have family like that can help us, but you do. You need to go home. And he just, I think the dependency on me, I think it wore on him. I think he, like anybody else, I compare it to, I was a sports writer at one time. I went to the college level and I wanted back to sports writer. I wanted to go back home. And so I did. And he just couldn't bring himself to admitting to me that his idea had failed, which, is ridiculous now that you think about it. And it makes me angry. And I get very frustrated when I think about what he could have done. Even if he was still doing drugs, I could have helped him here and could have continued the fight. And, but I can't continue the fight anymore because he's not here. And I really think down deep, he just wanted, if he was going to die, he just wanted to be alone. Like, he didn't want, to be around me if it happened, for me to find him, because my ex-wife, Ryan's mother, found him. Mm-hmm. And I think that really stuck in his head, that it really affected his mother. And I think he just didn't want to be found, if a EMS technician or a cop or somebody at that camp that he wasn't really close to, if they found him dead, I think he'd be, in a weird sense. I mean, I'm rationalizing this. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my head, but I think that's the way he wanted to go. He didn't want to me to walk into a room and say, "Hey, wake up, let's go get some breakfast at Waffle House," because he loved Waffle House, and then he did, and I found him dead. I don't think he wanted to do that to me. That's my rationalization for it. I don't know that, but I kind of think that's the way it was leaning.
When he was staying with you, and when he was using, when he was a threat to steal from you, did you have loved ones and others say, "What are you doing? Why are you sheltering this guy?" You sort of codependency, and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Like you said, the natural is very natural, and it's very common. To do that.
As a parent, I had family members. My other two children were great. They love me. They're great kids. But my daughter is very opinionated and very outspoken. And she was like, "You're enabling him. You're enabling him. You gotta." And I was like, "No, he's my son, and I love him like I love you." And I alienated, in a sense, Ryan, and I don't want to do that to Justin. I want to do, and she was very adamant. She come and talked to him one day when I wasn't here, and she laid it on him, and he just was oblivious to it. She said he just stared at me and wouldn't argue, wouldn't comment, just let her say her piece. And then, she left, and she said, "Dad, you just can't keep enabling." And I could not live with the fact, even when he went to the tent city, man, it was hard. It was just hard, man. I told my daughter, and I was like, I told my other son, I was like, I'm having a hard time with this. And she said, "Dad, he's an adult. She's got all the sense in the family, and he's making this choice. You got to live your life. You got your own issues. You need to make sure you're okay. And whatever happens, happens." Not that she wanted it to happen, but I had a lot of family of saying, kick him out. I couldn't do it. Looking back, had I done it earlier, he would have probably died earlier, because he just was not self-sufficient, and like I said, he was weak, and he just kind of let things dictate him. But because of my relationship with Ryan over the last 2 years of his life, I didn't want that same relation. I tried to do things differently, and unfortunately that didn't work either. So if anybody's got the way to do it, send me that book, because I need to read it. But
there's no book.
There is no book, and it's just, you try to lean on your faith a little bit, and you try to figure out ways to get through it. But like I said earlier, the way I'm going to get through this is by trying to help others. And, there's so many stories I could tell about Justin and Ryan, to be honest with you, but a lot of Justin stuff, because again, he was with me pretty much for the last, 15 years of his life or so. But that's kind of, but to answer your question, there were some family members that were not real happy with me, but I didn't care. I was like, "This is my son. I love all y'all, and y'all love me, but I got to do this." And it didn't work, and I'm sure some of them were, under their breath saying, "See, I told you it wasn't going to work." But I had to try. That was just the way I had to do it.
So basically, and tell me if I'm getting this right or wrong, after the tough love approach with Ryan alienated him and didn't work, you sort of, the correction, possibly overcorrection, was to go to the other extreme and to love Justin and to shelter him when maybe the clinical analysis of it is, hey, he's an adult, let him make his own decisions, whatever.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think that I made some mistakes, and the fact that he was an adult, his decision it's hard to explain how immature he was. He was mature in some areas, but in terms of life decisions. He was very immature. It was like a 14-year-old all the time. And I just felt like I had to shelter him and try to guide him. And he was very responsive to everything except getting treatment, except rehab. You know, he would help me do whatever I needed to do, and until the last year. And the last year is just when it went haywire. But up to that point, you know, other than me, you know, begging him, please don't go get high, and you know, please don't do drugs and all that other stuff. It was pretty good relationship. You know, we'd go to Braves games, and me and my other son, and you know, spend a weekend in Atlanta and watch the Braves, and you know, have a good time. But it's like when he came back, the next thing he would do is, you know, in his mind, I got to go get high. Mm-hmm. And you know, and unfortunately, whatever method I would try. I mean, I actually tried to get him arrested. And I mean, I called the police and said, hey, my son's high, and I want you to take him. He's like, well, does he have drugs on him? And I'm like, no, I got him in him. Yeah. And he's like, well, we can't arrest a guy for getting high once it's already in him. You know, I tried. I felt like if I could get him locked up,
yep,
you know, maybe he could go through the withdrawals in jail and come out and be okay. But as I've learned researching this over the last 3 weeks, you know, Google's a great thing, by the way. And I've just found that heroin addicts, it's very, 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 very hard to kick it and stay off it. And that doesn't excuse it. I wanted to try it, and but he just would not do it. He just wouldn't do it.
Ryan's ashes, he was a Clemson fan, and his ashes are buried right there by the hill at Death Valley. Ryan's,
that tree on my Twitter is right outside the hill. It's across the street, you know, where they run down the hill, yeah. But across the street there's a little gathering area. And I actually, there's a bush there, and I put some in Lake Hartwell, and then I took some, and there was a security guard there, and I paid him $20 to turn his head for a few minutes. and he did. He took the $20 and he turned his head, and I jumped in there, and I had people looking at me like, what is this guy doing? And I dug a little hole, and I buried some ashes there, and it was very therapeutic. And but he was an obnoxious. Ryan was an obnoxious Clemson fan. I mean, it was like, if Clemson wins, give Dabo a raise. If they lose, he's got to go. He's just not the answer. You know, I mean, he was like what you read on Twitter. And, you know, the happiest I've ever seen him was the LSU bowl game. I guess that was the Peach Bowl, when they beat LSU, that fourth down pass from Taj Boyd to Sammy Watkins. My son we were all watching it in my living room, and Ryan literally lost it. And then when they kicked that field goal, he ran in that yard, up the street, you know, waving his Clemson flag. I mean, he had it bad. And, you know, that was during the streak of South Carolina beating Clemson, you know, 5 in a row or whatever. And since he died, Clemson has not lost to South Carolina. And I kind of, in my own way, say, yeah, Ryan said it. Ryan said he's never going to let it happen again. Now, eventually they will, I'm sure. But he was a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, a huge Braves fan, and a huge Clemson fan. And, I mean, he lived and died for Saturday afternoons. And I took him to a Clemson game when he was 8 years old. Well, he might not have been 8. But it was the year that Steve Tannehill, I don't even know if you remember this, but yep. Tannehill signed the paw kind of thing, you know, went out to the paw at midfield and did his little thing, you know, when they beat Clemson, and Ryan was at that game. And God, he was young, but he about lost it. Like he was all the way home. He was like, I hope that Tannehill guy never wins another game in his life. And, you know, he goes, he shouldn't have. I mean, he was, I mean, to the day he did. And I know Steve Tannehill, you know, because he became a high school coach, and I tell Steve that story. And I was like, you know, Steve, you're a great coach and everything, but my son, he would not pee on you if you were on fire. And I was like, all because of that. And he laughed, and but that was Ryan's indoctrination into Clemson games, and he just I don't know how many. He went to a few games over the years, but he'd watch it on TV, and if he was working, he'd have it on a phone or his radio or whatever. But Justin was a Clemson fan, but not a huge fan. Like if he had something else to do, he wasn't going to sit and watch a game. But Ryan was, whew, yeah, he was. I mean, I used to always tell Ryan, I was like, Ryan, we can't fire the football coach after every loss. Like, you can't do that. That's not the way it works. He's like, well, I'm just saying the direction of the program's not good. And then they beat LSU, and he goes, they probably should give Dabo a raise. And I'm like, dude, you wanted to fire him a week ago, But that's a typical young Clemson fan. I always tease myself that if he were alive today, he would be early 30s now. He'd probably be more mature about it. And then I laugh, and I'm like, no, he wouldn't be. If he were alive today and had Twitter, I'd have to block him, because I'd just be like, dude, you can't, that's not the way the world works. And, but he's very happy wherever he is that Clemson has not lost to South Carolina since he died. So, I actually emailed Dabo about that. And he emailed me back and thought it was very cool. And I was like, in my son's memory, man, don't ever lose to South Carolina again. And they haven't. I don't think he remembers that, but they haven't. So I'm going to stick with that story.
David Shelton, I admire your courage. A lot of other people do as well. And man, really appreciate you giving your time and sharing with us and everybody else.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I've told many people whatever opportunity I have to try to help people, and hopefully somebody will hear this and they'll shed a tear and they'll chuckle but somebody will be affected, and that's all we can do in life is try to be a positive influence the best we can. So I definitely appreciate your opportunity.
All right, appreciate David sharing and just really bearing it all for us. I think going to be helpful for listeners. I think probably also helpful for David himself. Some therapy for sure, I think, just in sharing. Appreciate, as always, the support of our very generous sponsors for helping make this happen. And, of course, most of all, thanks to all of you for hitting play. We'll be back very soon. Everybody have a great rest of the week and weekend. Cheers.